The crystal towers of Axiom Prime reached into the purple sky like frozen lightning. Inside the biggest tower, 17 different alien species sat in a giant circle. Their voices filled the air with clicks, hums, and sounds no human throat could make. This was the Galactic Tribunal, the most powerful court in the known universe. Hannah stood in chains in a metal cage at the center of the room. The chains were heavy, made from some alien metal that felt cold against her skin. She was small compared to most of the aliens around her, barely 5 feet tall, with short black hair and dark eyes that missed nothing. Her military uniform was torn and dirty from weeks in prison, but she stood straight. She would not bow to these creatures. Next to her cage, Ambassador Kong Min-ho knelt in his own chains. He was older than Hannah, with gray hair and kind eyes that now looked tired and dulled. And sad. Blood dried on his lip where a guard had hit him for speaking out of turn. His translator box hung around his neck, crackling with static. The human female stands accused of war crimes, said High Chancellor Vexstar. He was the leader of this trial. Vexstar looked like a giant snake with arms, his skin silver and his eyes like black glass. When he spoke, his voice sounded like metal scraping against stone. She has broken every law of civilized warfare. Hannah almost laughed. Civilized warfare. These aliens still fought wars like it was a game with rules. They lined up their ships in neat rows and shot at each other until one side gave up. They thought war should be fair and honorable. Humans knew better. War was not fair. War was about winning. The defendant will hear the charges, Vexstar continued. He held up a crystal pad that glowed with alien writing. First charge, use of surprise attacks against military targets. The translator around Minho's neck buzzed as it changed the alien words to human speech. Other aliens in the circle made angry sounds, clicks, and whistles that meant they agreed with the charges. Hannah remembered those surprise attacks. The hegemony had come to human space with a huge fleet, expecting humans to line up and fight like good little soldiers. Instead, Hannah had hidden human ships behind asteroids and space junk. When the alien fleet passed by, the humans attacked from behind and from the sides. 3 alien dreadnoughts exploded before they knew what was happening. Second charge, Vexstar said. Use of traps and mines in battle zones. More angry alien sounds. Hannah smiled a little. The aliens called them traps. Humans called them tactics. When the hegemony sent troops to take human colonies, they found the cities empty. But when they walked into the buildings, the doors locked and the air turned to poison gas. When they tried to use human roads, the ground exploded under their feet. The aliens had never seen warfare like this. They were used to enemies who fought with honor. Humans fought to survive. Third charge, psychological warfare against enemy forces. This one made Hannah smile bigger. She remembered the recordings. They had played on alien communication channels, sounds of human laughter mixed with screams. Videos of what happened to alien prisoners, not torture, just humans doing normal human things that scared aliens to death. Eating meat, lifting heavy things, healing from wounds that should have killed them. The aliens learned to fear humans. That fear made them make mistakes. Mistakes that Hannah used to destroy their fleets. Fourth charge, Vexstar's voice got louder and more angry. Teaching other species these forbidden tactics. Some of the aliens in the circle stood up and made loud noises. This charge made them very angry. Hannah had done something no one expected. She had found other species that were tired of hegemony rule. She taught them human ways of fighting. Soon, rebels across the galaxy were using human tactics against their alien masters. The hegemony had ruled for 1,000 years by keeping everyone in line. But humans showed other species that the strong could be beaten by the clever. The evidence is clear, said another alien. this one looking like a giant blue spider. The human female has corrupted the natural order of warfare. She has made war into something ugly and without honor. Minho tried to stand, his chains rattling. "Honor," he said, his voice shaking with anger. "You came to our worlds to make us slaves. You burned our cities and killed our children. Where was honor then?" A guard hit Minho with an energy stick. Blue lightning ran through his body, and he fell down, shaking. Hannah's hands turned into fists, but her chains held her tight. "The human ambassador will be silent," Vexstar said. "We are here to judge the war criminal, not to hear excuses." Hannah finally spoke. Her voice was calm and clear. "I am not a war criminal. I am a soldier who did her job." The aliens in the circle made shocked sounds. They had not expected her to speak. "Your job?" Vexstar leaned forward, his black eyes staring at her. "Your job was to surrender when superior forces arrived. Your job was to accept the natural order. The strong rule the weak. This is the way of the universe." "No," Hannah said. "The smart rule the stupid. And you were stupid enough to attack humans." The room exploded with angry alien voices. Some aliens stood up and made threatening moves toward Hannah's cage. Guards had to hold them back. Vexstar raised one long arm, and the room got quiet. The human female shows no shame for her crimes. She feels no guilt for the lives lost because of her actions. "I feel guilty about one thing," Hannah said. "I feel guilty that I did not kill more of you." This time the guards could not hold back the angry aliens. Several of them rushed toward Hannah's cage, making sounds like angry animals. Energy weapons charged up with high whining sounds. For a moment, it looked like they would kill her right there. But Vexstar made a sharp sound that froze everyone in place. "No," he said. "Death is too easy for this one. The court has already decided her punishment." The room got very quiet. Even the guards stopped moving. "Lee, Hannah, you have shown that humans are too dangerous to live among civilized species. You have proven that your kind cannot be trusted with the knowledge of war. Therefore, the court sentences you to exile." Hannah felt her heart beat faster. Exile could mean many things. Some exile worlds were not too bad, just empty planets where prisoners could live alone. But Vexstar's next words made her blood turn cold. "You will be taken to Cathara, the graveyard of worlds. Will be given basic supplies and left alone with the apex predators. Let us see how long the great human warrior survives against creatures that know only killing." Several aliens in the circle made sounds that might have been laughter. Others looked pleased. Everyone knew about Cathara. It was the worst world in the galaxy, where evolution had created nothing but monsters. The average lifespan of exiles sent there was 14 hours. As guards came to take her away, Hannah caught Minho's eyes. His face was full of pain and worry. She could see him trying to think of something to say, some way to help her. She smiled at him and mouthed 2 words, "Trust me." Then the guards dragged her toward the prison ship that would carry her to hell. But as they pulled her through the crystal corridors, Hannah was not thinking about death. She was thinking about evolution, about apex predators, about what it really meant to be the top of the food chain. The aliens were about to learn something important about humans. They were about to learn that humans had not climbed to the top of Earth's food chain by being the biggest or the strongest. They had done it by being the most dangerous, and Cathara was about to get a new kind of predator. The prison ship threw Hannah's escape pod toward Cathara like a stone. Through the small window, she watched the Deathworld grow bigger and bigger. The planet looked like a giant red eye, covered in swirling storms and glowing with heat from volcanoes. Even from space, she could see lightning dancing across the surface. The ship's captain, a 4-armed alien with purple skin, spoke through the pod's radio. His voice sounded happy. "Enjoy your new home, human. Try to last longer than the last prisoner." He screamed for 6 hours before something ate him. Then the prison ship jumped away, leaving Hannah alone with a pod falling toward hell. The pod shook and burned as it hit the atmosphere. Red lightning hit the sides, making the metal glow. Hannah held tight to her seat as the world spun around her. The parachute opened with a loud bang, but one of the lightning strikes had damaged it. The pod hit the ground hard, bouncing and rolling across red sand before it finally stopped. Hannah lay still for a moment, checking her body for broken bones. Her head hurt and her shoulder ached, but nothing was broken. She had been lucky. The pod could have exploded when it crashed. She opened the pod door and stepped out into her new world. The heat hit her like a wall. The air was thick and smelled like sulfur and something rotten. Red sand stretched in all directions, but this was not normal sand. It moved in small waves like it was alive. Steam rose from cracks in the ground, and she could hear rumbling sounds from deep underground. The sky was the color of old blood, with 3 small moons hanging like white eyes. Strange plants grew here and there, black trees with thorns instead of leaves, and vines covered in spikes that moved when she looked at them. Hannah opened the pod's emergency kit. Inside was a bottle of water, some food packets, a basic medical kit, and a knife. The knife was more like a toy the aliens had given her, just enough to make her death more interesting. She checked her watch. According to the prison ship's records, most exiles died in 14 hours. The sun was setting now, which meant the real predators would come out soon. Hannah looked around the crash site. The pod had left a long trail in the sand, and pieces of metal were scattered everywhere. She could use some of this. She started gathering the bigger pieces, looking for anything sharp or useful. That was when she noticed the sand around her feet was moving. She jumped back, just as something burst out of the ground where she had been standing. It looked like a mouthful of teeth with tentacles around the edges. The sand itself was alive, or at least something lived in it that could grab anything that stood still too long. Carnivorous sand, Hannah said to herself. Of course, she found a piece of metal from the pod and threw it onto the sand nearby. Immediately, 3 of the mouth creatures jumped up to grab it. They fought over the metal for a few seconds before disappearing back under the sand. Hannah smiled. "Stupid," she said, "but fast." She spent the next hour testing the sand creatures. They reacted to weight and vibration. They were fast, but not very smart. And they did not like fire when she lit one of her food packets and threw it onto the sand. The creatures stayed away from that spot. As the sun disappeared, Hannah heard her first real predator. The howl came from somewhere in the darkness beyond her crash site. It sounded like a wolf, but bigger and angrier. Much angrier. Other howls answered from different directions. She was surrounded. Hannah gathered pieces of the pod and built a small shelter against a large rock. She used the pod's emergency power cell to make a small electric fence around her camp. It would not stop anything big, but it might make smaller predators think twice. Then she waited. The first attack came just after midnight. The creature that stepped into the light of her small fire was like nothing from Earth. It was as big as a bear, but moved like a cat. Its body was covered in armor plates that looked like black glass, and its mouth was full of teeth that glowed in the dark. Razor-sharp claws extended from its feet, each one as long as Hannah's hand. The alien prisoners had called these creatures razor maws. The beast walked around her camp in a circle, testing the electric fence. When it touched the wire, blue sparks flew, and the creature jumped back with an angry growl. But it did not leave. It sat down and watched her with eyes like burning coals. "Smart," Hannah said quietly. "You know the fence won't last long." She was right. The power cell was already running low. In a few hours, the fence would die and the razor maw would have her. But Hannah was not planning to wait a few hours. She had noticed something about the way the creature moved. It favored its left front leg, putting most of its weight on the right side. An old injury, maybe, or just the way it was built. Either way, it was a weakness. Hannah took apart one of the pod's support beams. The metal was strong and had a sharp edge where it had broken. She tied it to a long piece of cable from the pod's wiring, making a spear with a rope attached. Then she did something the creature did not expect. She turned off the electric fence. The razor maw's eyes went wide with surprise. It stood up slowly, not sure if this was a trap. When nothing happened, it started walking toward her. Hannah waited until it was close enough to smell its breath, which smelled like rotten meat and acid. Then she threw the spear. The creature was fast, but Hannah had aimed where it would be, not where it was. The spear hit its weak left leg and went deep into the muscle. The razor maw screamed a sound like breaking glass and fell to one side. Hannah pulled hard on the cable, using the creature's own weight against it. The spear came free, but left a deep wound. Black blood sprayed onto the red sand. The creature tried to stand, but its leg would not hold its weight. It fell again, snarling and snapping at the air. Hannah moved around behind it and drove her knife into the base of its skull. The razor maw died with a sound like a sigh. Hannah sat back on the sand, breathing hard. Her first kill on Kythera. But she knew this was just the beginning. As she cleaned her knife, she heard something that made her freeze. Footsteps, lots of them. Coming closer, she looked up to see 6 pairs of glowing eyes watching her from the darkness. More razor maws. They had smelled the blood and come to investigate, but they were not attacking. They were just watching. One of them, bigger than the others, stepped forward. It looked at the dead razor maw, then at Hannah, then at the spear in her hands. It made a low sound, not a growl, but something else. Something that sounded almost like respect. Then it turned and walked away. The others followed. Hannah stared into the darkness long after they were gone. Something had just happened that she did not understand. The creatures had seen her kill one of their own, and instead of attacking, they had left her alone. On Earth, pack animals sometimes did this. When a new predator proved it was strong enough, the pack would test it, but not fight it. They would watch and learn. Interesting, Hannah said to the empty desert. She spent the rest of the night skinning the dead razor maw and cooking its meat over her fire. The meat was tough and tasted terrible, but it was protein. She would need all the strength she could get. As the sun rose over the red desert, Hannah made a decision. She would not just survive on this world, she would learn its rules. She would understand its creatures. And then she would make them understand her. In the distance, something howled. But this time, Hannah howled back. The sound echoed across the red sand like a challenge, like a promise. The apex predators of Kythera were about to meet something they had never seen. Before a human who refused to be prey. Day 2 was about to begin. 6 months had passed since Hannah crashed on Kythera. The small human woman who had once stood in chains before the Galactic Tribunal was gone. In her place stood something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. Hannah's skin was darker, now burned by the red sun and marked with scars from 100 fights. Her hair had grown long and was tied back with strips of leather made from dead predators. Her clothes were gone, replaced by armor made from razor maw plates and storm titan hide. Around her neck hung a necklace of teeth, 1 tooth for each. Kill. There were a lot of teeth. She stood on a cliff overlooking the obsidian caverns, watching her territory. Because that was what this was, now her territory. Every creature for 50 miles knew her scent. They knew her rules. They knew what happened to things that broke those rules. Behind her, something the size of a house moved in the shadows of the cave. Goliath was his name, though he had not always been called that. When Hannah first met him, he was just another storm titan, a giant creature covered in rocky skin with eyes like burning stars. Storm titans were the biggest predators on Kythera, and they feared nothing. But Goliath had learned to fear something. He had learned to fear disappointing his alpha. "Time to hunt," Hannah said, without turning around. Goliath rumbled deep in his chest, a sound like distant thunder. It meant yes. It meant he was ready. It meant he would follow her into any battle. Hannah climbed onto his back, settling between the spikes that grew from his shoulders. Her legs gripped his sides like she had been born to ride storm titans. In her hand, she held a spear made from the armbone of a titan killer, a creature that had once been the most feared predator on the planet. Until it met her. Goliath walked to the edge of the cliff and jumped. They fell through the air for several seconds before his massive legs hit the ground. The impact would have killed a normal human, but Hannah was not normal anymore. She had adapted to this world, just like everything else that survived here. As they moved through the red desert, other creatures joined them. A pack of razor maws ran alongside Goliath, their black armor gleaming in the sunlight. Above them, shadow stalkers moved through the air, creatures that looked like flying snakes with wings made of dark energy. They could bend light around themselves to become invisible, but they chose to let Hannah see them. It was a sign of respect. The hunting pack grew larger as they traveled. Spike wolves emerged from underground tunnels, their fur covered in sharp quills that could shoot out like arrows. Thorn vipers slithered out of the poisonous plants, their bodies glowing with toxic light. Even the smaller predators joined them. Saber cats and flame beetles and creatures that had no names because no one had lived long enough to name them. All of them followed Hannah. The aliens who had sent her here thought they were giving her a death sentence. Instead, they had given her an army. The pack stopped at the edge of a crater where 3 ships had crashed. These were not old crashes. The metal was still warm and smoke rose from the wreckage. Fresh prey had arrived. "Prison transport Hannah," said, reading the alien writing on the side of the largest ship. "Looks like they sent us more friends." She had learned to read alien languages during her months on Kythera. When you found enough crashed ships, you learned things. You learned about the galaxy outside. You learned about the war that was still going on. You learned about the humans who were still fighting, and you learned about the aliens who kept sending prisoners to die on your world. Hannah climbed down from Goliath and walked toward the crashed ships. The other predators spread out around the crater surrounding the wreckage. They moved without sound, like ghosts made of teeth and claws. Inside the first ship, she found 12 aliens from different species. They were all wounded and scared. When they saw her, they made sounds of fear and surprise. To them, she looked like a monster, a human covered in the skins of predators, followed by creatures from their worst nightmares. "Please," said one of the aliens, a bird-like creature with blue feathers. "Do not let them eat us. We are not criminals. We are prisoners of war." Hannah studied the aliens. They were thin and weak. Not soldiers, but civilians. The hegemony was running out of real criminals to send to Kythera, so now they were sending anyone who spoke against them. "What war?" Hannah asked. The bird alien looked confused. "The human war? It has spread to 6 systems. The rebels are using tactics we have never seen before. They fight like spee." He stopped and looked at Hannah with new understanding. "They fight like you." Hannah smiled, showing teeth that were sharper than they used to be. "Good," they learned. She helped the aliens out of the crashed ship and checked their wounds. Most of them would live, but they needed food and water. The desert was not kind to creatures that did not know its rules. "Listen carefully," Hannah told them. "You are not on a prison world anymore. You are in my territory. You will follow my rules, or you will die. Understand?" The aliens nodded quickly. They were too scared to argue. First rule, Hannah continued. You work for your food. Everyone contributes or everyone starves. Second rule, you do not kill each other. If you have problems, you bring them to me. Third rule, when I say run, you run. When I say hide, you hide. When I say fight, you fight. Break these rules and the predators will eat you. One of the aliens, a lizard-like creature with green scales, spoke up. What if we refuse? What if we try to escape? Hannah pointed to the ridge above the crater. The alien looked up and saw dozens of glowing eyes watching them. Razor maws, shadow stalkers, spike wolves, and things that had no names, all of them waiting for Hannah's command. You can try, Hannah said, but nothing leaves my territory without my permission. The aliens quickly agreed to her rules. Over the next few days, Hannah taught the new arrivals how to survive on Kithara. She showed them which plants were safe to eat and which ones would kill them. She taught them how to find water in the desert and how to build shelters that the predators would not attack. She showed them how to move without triggering the carnivorous sand and how to hide from the things that hunted in the night. But most importantly, she taught them that survival was not about being the strongest or the fastest. It was about understanding the rules of the world you lived in and making those rules work for you. The aliens learned quickly. They had to. The alternative was death. As the weeks passed, more ships crashed in Hannah's territory. Some were prison transports carrying more exiles. Others were scout ships sent by the hegemony to find out what was happening to their prison transports. A few were human ships carrying supplies for the rebels. Hannah welcomed them all, but on her terms. The obsidian caverns became more than just a shelter. They became a fortress. The aliens helped dig new tunnels and build walls from the wreckage of crashed ships. They set up traps around the perimeter and created hiding places for the smaller predators. They even built a communication center using salvage technology, and through it all, Hannah's pack of predators grew larger and more organized. She taught the razor maws to work together in coordinated attacks. She showed the shadow stalkers how to use their invisibility for scouting and reconnaissance. She trained the spike wolves to carry messages between different parts of her territory. She even taught some of the smaller creatures to operate simple tools. The aliens who lived in her territory could not believe what they were seeing. Predators and prey working together. Hunters taking orders from a human. An entire ecosystem reorganizing itself around one small woman who refused to die. But Hannah was not just building an army. She was building something bigger. She was building a new kind of civilization, one based on strength and survival, rather than politics and fear. Late at night, when the 3 moons were high in the sky, Hannah would sit on the highest peak of the obsidian caverns and look up at the stars. Somewhere out there, humans were still fighting. Somewhere out there, Ambassador Kong Min-ho was still trying to negotiate for peace. But Hannah was done with negotiation. She was done with being the underdog. She was done with being someone else's prisoner. She had found her place in the galaxy's food chain. She was at the top, and soon she would prove it to everyone. Soon, she whispered to the stars. Very soon. Behind her, Goliath rumbled agreement. Around the caverns, hundreds of predators settled down for the night. But they were not just predators anymore. They were soldiers, and they were ready for war. The alarm in Hannah's communication center screamed through the obsidian caverns. Red lights flashed as the sensors picked up something big approaching Kithara. Really big. Hannah ran to the control room, her armor clanking with each step. Behind her, Goliath squeezed through the tunnel, his massive form barely fitting in the space. Other predators gathered around them, razor maws with their glowing teeth. Shadow stalkers floating in the air, and dozens of smaller creatures all looking to their alpha for orders. What is it? asked Gina, one of the alien prisoners who had learned to work the communication equipment. She was a small blue creature with 6 arms and large eyes that were good at reading the complex displays. Hannah looked at the screen and smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator who had found new prey. "A Gemini supply convoy," she said. 3 heavy cruisers and 12 escort ships. They think they are safe out there in space. The convoy was heading toward the edge of hegemony space, carrying weapons and supplies for the war against the human rebels. They had no idea that Cathara was no longer just a prison world. They had no idea that the planet now had teeth. "Send." The signal, Hannah ordered. Gina's 6 arms moved quickly over the controls. Deep in space, a message traveled faster than light toward human rebel territory. It was a simple message in a code that Hannah had learned from captured hegemony communications. "Fresh meat. Come hungry." 3 days later, Captain Park Ji-soo arrived with a small human fleet. She had expected to find one surviving prisoner hiding in caves. Instead, her ships detected a massive base with organized defenses and technology that should not exist on a Deathworld. "This is Captain Park 2, whoever is running that base," came the voice over the radio. "Identify yourself." Hannah picked up the communicator. "Hello, Captain. My name is Lee Hannah. I believe you've got my message." There was a long silence. Then Park's voice came back, full of surprise. "Hannah, Lee Hannah, the strategist from the Seoul Defense. But you are supposed to be dead. The report said you were exiled." "To a death world, I was," Hannah replied. "I got better." Another silence. Then Park laughed, a sound of amazement and disbelief. "Well, Commander, what do you need?" "Transport ships," Hannah said. "Big ones. And environmental suits sized for very large passengers." "How large?" Hannah looked at Goliath, who was listening to the conversation with interest. "How sized?" "Parks." Fleet landed in the crater outside the obsidian caverns 2 hours later. When the human captain stepped out of her ship, she stopped and stared. The sight before her was impossible. Hundreds of creatures that should have been trying to kill each other were working together. Razor maws carried equipment in their mouths. Shadow stalkers used their abilities to move supplies without being seen. Spike wolves dug loading ramps into the sides of the human ships. And over all of them, directing their work like a conductor leading an orchestra, was a small human woman who looked like she had been born on this world of monsters. "How" was all Park could say. Hannah walked over to her, moving with the fluid grace of someone who had learned to survive among apex predators. "They respect strength," she said simply. "I showed them strength. Now they follow me. But these are wild animals, monsters." "No," Hannah said, scratching behind the ears of a saber cat that had wandered over to them. The creature, which could tear apart a tank with its claws, purred like a house cat. "They are soldiers. They just needed someone to teach them how to be soldiers." Park spent the next hour touring Hannah's base. She saw training areas where predators practiced complex battle formations. She saw workshops where aliens and humans worked together to build weapons and armor. She saw communication centers that monitored hegemony fleet movements across 3 star systems. Most amazing of all, she saw the loading areas where Storm Titans were being fitted with power armor and life support systems that would let them survive in space. "You are planning to take them off-world," Park said. It was not a question. "The hegemony thinks they exiled me," Hannah replied. "They think they got rid of their human problem by throwing me away. They are about to learn that. You cannot throw away a human. You can only make her angrier." The loading took 2 days. Hannah's predators had to be fitted with special suits that would protect them in the vacuum of space. The Storm Titans needed the biggest suits, room-sized containers with artificial gravity and atmosphere control. The smaller predators could share transport ships, but they needed to be sedated to prevent them from fighting during the journey. Hannah did not sedate them. She talked to them instead, explaining what was going to happen and why. The predators listened and understood. They trusted their alpha as the last transport ship was loaded. Captain Park found Hannah standing on the cliff where she had first claimed this territory. "Are you sure about this?" Park asked. "Once we leave Cathara, there is no going back. The hegemony will never let you return." Hannah looked out over the red desert where she had learned to become something more than human. "I am not going back," she said. "I am going forward, and I am bringing my family with me." The fleet jumped to hyperspace just as hegemony patrol ships arrived to investigate the unusual activity around Cathara. By the time the aliens realized what had happened, the transport ships were already 3 systems away. Admiral Ko Seung-min of the Human Liberation Fleet was not expecting visitors when his flagship detected the approaching convoy. He was even less prepared for Captain Park's message. "Sir, I have a delivery for you. 1 former exile and approximately 300 apex predators. They would like to help with the war." The Admiral's response was not printable and polite. "Company." But when Hannah's transport docked with his flagship, and she walked onto his bridge, followed by a Storm Titan in power armor, Admiral Ko decided that perhaps the war had just taken an interesting turn. "Admiral," Hannah said, saluting in the old human military style. "Commander Lee," Hannah, reporting for duty. "I brought some friends." Behind her, Goliath stepped carefully onto the bridge. His power armor hummed with energy and his eyes glowed like stars. The bridge crew backed away in fear and amazement. "We are ready to serve," Goliath rumbled in perfect human language. He had learned to speak during the long journey from Cathara. Admiral Ko stared at the Storm Titan, then at Hannah, then back at the Storm Titan. "Commander, what exactly are you proposing?" Hannah smiled the smile that had terrified aliens across 3 star systems. "I am proposing that we show the hegemony what happens when you exile a human to a world full of monsters. We are going to teach them that the monsters were not the ones they should have been afraid of. And what is the plan?" "Simple," Hannah said. "We are going to hit their supply lines. We are going to board their ships. We are going to show them what real predators look like when they hunt in space instead of on a planet." She turned to look out the bridge windows at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the hegemony fleets thought they were safe in their metal ships with their energy shields and their plasma weapons. They were about to discover that evolution did not stop at the edge of space. It just found new hunting grounds. "Contact all human rebel fleets," Admiral Ko ordered his communications officer. "Tell them to prepare for something they have never seen before." As the message went out across human space, Hannah felt a familiar feeling in her chest. It was the same feeling she had felt on Cathara when she first heard the howl of a Razor Maw pack. It was the feeling of a hunt about to begin, and this time, the prey was the entire galactic hegemony. The crystal towers of Axiom Prime burned against the purple sky, where once they had reached toward the heavens like frozen lightning. Now they were broken and smoking. The most powerful court in the galaxy was under attack, and the attackers were winning. High Chancellor Vexstar crouched behind an overturned table in what used to be the Galactic Tribunal's main chamber. Energy blasts flew over his head as his guards fought a battle they could not win. Outside the massive windows, he could see human ships surrounding the planet. But it was not the ships that terrified him. It was what had come out of the ships. A Storm Titan in power armor smashed through the reinforced doors of the chamber. The creature was the size of a small building, its rocky skin covered in metal plates that sparked with energy. Its eyes burned like stars as it looked around the room. Searching for targets, behind the Storm Titan came smaller predators. Razor Maws with cybernetic enhancements, shadow stalkers that flickered in and out of visibility. spike wolves with armor plating that made them look like living tanks. All of them moved with deadly purpose, and walking among them as calm as if she were taking a stroll in a garden was Hannah. She had changed again. The armor she wore now was not made from dead predator skin, but from advanced human technology. Combined with alien alloys, her weapons were no longer primitive spears, but energy rifles that could punch through starship hulls. But her eyes were the same, dark and intelligent, and absolutely without fear. "Hello, Chancellor," Hannah said, stepping over the debris of his once mighty court. "Remember me?" Vextar's snake-like body shook with terror. This was impossible. The human should be dead. She should have been torn apart by the predators of Cathara within hours of her exile. Instead, she stood before him with those same predators following her commands. "You," he whispered. "But how?" "The reports," said Cathara. "Was empty? Our scouts found nothing." "Your scouts found what I wanted them to find," Hannah replied. "Empty caves and old bones." They never looked very carefully. If they had, they might have noticed that the bones were arranged in patterns that spelled out messages in 17 different alien languages. She gestured to Goliath, who stepped forward. The massive storm titan was careful not to step on any of the cowering aliens in the room, but his presence made them all freeze with terror. The messages all said the same thing. Hannah continued. "Leave now, or become part of the ecosystem." Vextar tried to stand, but his legs would not support him. Around the chamber, other members of the tribunal made small sounds of fear. These were the beings who had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years, and they were reduced to frightened animals by the presence of one human and her pack. "What do you want?" Vextar managed to ask. Hannah sat down in the Chancellor's chair, the seat of power that had condemned her to death. It fit her perfectly. "I want you to understand something very important. You thought you were punishing me? When you sent me to Cathara, you thought you were getting rid of a problem?" She leaned forward, her voice becoming very quiet and very dangerous. "Instead, you gave me a planet full of the most efficient killers in the galaxy. You gave me time to teach them. You gave me the chance to become something you never expected." "What?" Vextar asked, though he was afraid of the answer. "The alpha predator of the universe." As if summoned by her words, more creatures entered the chamber. Admiral Ko Sungmin walked in with a squad of human marines, but they were not the most impressive arrivals. Behind them came Captain Park Jisoo, leading a group of alien prisoners who had been freed from hegemony labor camps. And behind them came Ambassador Kong Minho, walking slowly but with dignity intact. Minho looked older than when Hannah had last seen him, but his eyes were bright with joy and amazement. "Hannah," he said simply, "you came back. I promised I would." She replied, standing to embrace her old friend. "I just brought some company." The battle for Axiom Prime had lasted only 3 days, but it would be remembered for 1,000 years. The hegemony's most powerful fleets had been scattered by attacks unlike anything they had ever seen. Storm Titans in spacesuits had torn through starship hulls with their bare hands. Shadow Stalkers had infiltrated command centers without being detected, taking control of weapon systems and turning them against their owners. Razor Maws had led boarding parties that moved through enemy ships, like living nightmares. But the most terrifying thing was not the creatures themselves. It was how they worked together. They followed complex battle plans. They used advanced tactics. They adapted to new situations faster than any artificial intelligence. They had been trained by a human. "The siege of Axiom Prime is over," Admiral Ko announced to the assembled tribunal. "Your fleets are destroyed or have surrendered. Your military command is in our hands. Your empire is finished. What are your terms?" asked one of the alien counselors, a bird-like creature with silver feathers. Hannah stood up from the Chancellor's chair and walked to the center of the chamber. Around her, predators and humans formed a circle, creating a new kind of court. The terms are simple. Humanity is now recognized as the apex species in this galaxy. All aggressive actions against human colonies will stop immediately. Reparations will be paid for the damage you have caused. And if we refuse? Bekstar asked. Hannah smiled, and every alien in the room shuddered. You won't refuse. 'Cause you know what happens to species that try to hunt humans. You have seen what we can do when we are angry. You do not want to see what we can do when we are really angry. She gestured to the broken walls and smoking ruins around them. This was just a demonstration, a small taste of what we are capable of. If you force us to show you more, there will not be enough of your species left to sign a surrender. The treaty was signed 3 hours later. The galactic hegemony officially recognized human sovereignty over all human colonies and agreed to pay massive reparations for their attempted genocide. More importantly, they agreed to a new law that would govern relations between species. No species would be considered superior to any other. Strength would be measured not by size or technology, but by adaptability and survival skills. Humans, it was acknowledged, were very good at surviving. 1 month later, Hannah stood on the observation deck of New Cathera, a space station built from the remains of captured hegemony ships. Through the massive windows, she could see construction ships working to build training facilities for her growing army of predators. Human children played in the recreational areas, laughing as young spike wolves chased balls and baby storm. Titans gave them rides on their backs. Ambassador Minho joined her at the window. Did you ever imagine it would end like this? Hannah watched a group of human cadets training alongside juvenile razor maws, learning to work together as partners rather than predator and prey. I always knew humans would win, she said. We are survivors. We adapt. We overcome. And the aliens? What about them? They will learn. The smart ones already have. They understand now that cooperation is better than conquest. The ones who do not learn, ... double quotes. Hannah shrugged. Evolution will take care of them. Admiral Ko approached them, carrying a datapad with the latest reports from across the galaxy. The last hegemony holdouts have surrendered, he announced. The war is officially over. What are your orders, Supreme Commander? Hannah had been given that title by the Joint Human-Alien Council that now governed the galaxy. She was in charge of all military forces, both human and alien. More importantly, she was in charge of the predator armies that had made victory possible. Stand down all combat operations, she ordered. Begin the integration protocols. I want mixed crews on all patrol ships, humans, aliens, and predators working together. Show the galaxy what cooperation looks like. As Admiral Ko left to carry out her orders, Hannah turned back to the window. In the distance, she could see a transport ship arriving from Earth, carrying families who wanted to join the new frontier colonies. Soon, human children would grow up playing with creatures that had once been the most feared predators in the galaxy. The aliens made one mistake, Hannah said quietly to Minho. They thought being human was a weakness. They thought our emotions and our pack instincts made us inferior. And now? Hannah placed her hand on the window, watching as a young storm titan carefully carried a human child on its shoulders. Now they understand that those same emotions and instincts are what make us the ultimate apex predators. We do not just survive. We make everything around us stronger. She turned away from the window and walked toward the command center, where representatives from dozens of species waited for her daily briefing. Behind her, through the window, the galaxy spread out like a vast hunting ground. But the hunt was over. Now came something even more challenging and rewarding. Now came building, a civilization where every species could thrive, and at the top of it all, keeping the peace through strength and wisdom, were the creatures from Cathara and the human who had taught them that the strongest pack was one that protected rather than destroyed. The apex predators had found their true purpose. They were guardians now, and the galaxy was safer for it.